Okay. Kumlen and Ablat Gemara. We are up to Daf Tes Vav Amud Aleph, and we're continuing for the rest of this blot talking about agriculture, talking about all the different times. We said before that when it comes to vegetables, it's unique. We go after the time you pick it, and because it continues to grow on the rain. Even after initial rains, and if you cut it, it grows back straight away. So therefore, you look at the current thing. We say when it comes to grains and wine and oil, once it's a third ready, that's because that's where the bulk of the water comes from. When it came to fruits, we said it's chanota, when they begin to blossom, because the sap in the tree, the water from the past goes up through the tree, and that nurtures the fruits, and that's where the fruits begin to blossom from last year's crop. And then legumes, we said, is mishas l'kita when you legumes said mishas hashosh when you put in the ground. You can do mishas l'kita when you collect it, because you don't collect in big quantities and very small quantities, and it's very confusing, the old and the new. So therefore, it's you do it when it goes in the ground, sets in the ground. That's the four different timetables that we learned. So we're up to the Gemara, up to Zvav and Amud Aleph, and the Gemara continues exploring the different things. And the Gemara wants to know. About 10 lines on the top of the page. Rabbi Yechon asked Rabbi Yanai a question. Esrig Rosh Hashana Shalai Emasai. When it comes to an esrig, we discussed yesterday. We had Rabbi Bar Abhuna, who was saying that if you hold an esrig when it comes to meiser, is you go after when you pick it like a vegetable. Then what about the Rosh Hashana? Is it in Tishrei? Like the vegetables, or is it Tu B'Shvat when you start counting the new year versus the old year, like all other fruits? And we had to, the revised finally said it's Tu B'Shvat. So similarly, Rabbi Yochanan was asked a question from Rabbi Yanai a question. Esrig Rosh Hashana Shalai Emasai. On Esrig, when is Rosh Hashana? Amalei Shvat. He says Esrig is Rosh Hashana is Shvat. Says the Gemara, Shvat Chadoshim or Shvat Kufa. Is it the Shvat like the lunar calendar and where the month is, or is it Shvat of the solar calendar? Because really, when it comes to plantations and all that, it's a solar calendar, it's the sun that makes it grow, and the seasons and everything else. So we're following Shvat of the solar year, which is a bit later. It's the Shvat that we have in our calendar. Another question. If you have a leap year, what do we say then? You have an extra other. Do we say that Shvat is really other Rishon? And therefore it's other Rishon, or Shvat still remains the same? You follow the majority of years, Shvat still remains the same Shvat, whatever we call Shvat. So the Gemara, Rabba said, so Rabba made the following comment. Esrig bath shishish. If you have an esrig that is the 6th year, shenichnes al shvis, and it went into, you didn't pick it until the 7th year. Petura min ha-meiser. On the one hand, it is potter from meiser, which sounds like you're saying, why is it potter from meiser? Because we treat it like the 7th year. No, we look at esrig the time that you picked it. But yet, upetura min ha-bir, it doesn't have the dinim of shmita where you have to burn it by a certain time, by Pesach time. It's like the 6th year, which is not part of shmita. No, but you go after the time that it began to blossom. So it's not clear what the Rabbah is saying here. Which one is it? You go after time of picking or after time of blossom? We'll soon see. Now, to say that we treat it like a Shemitah year rather than a 6th year is actually a Chumrah, because Shemitah has obviously all these Chumras, which means that you're being machmer like Shemitah. And yet you're being lenient here and you're saying you're potter from a beer. What's going on? The Gemara will soon explain. Baye won't let him up. Won't disappoint us. Ubas shvis. Then he says, what about if it blossomed in the 7th year and Shemitah year? Shenichnas of the Shemitah is, and it went into the 8th year. It went into the year after Shemitah. So P'tura in other words, we go after the time of blossom, which is Shemitah, and the Chayev is beer because we go after the time. So in the second half, the Sefer sounds like he learns implicitly that this is Shemitah. We look at a time when it blossomed, it has all the din of Shemitah, including the beer. It's the ratio that's a problem. So Amalei Bye said to his Rebbe, Bishleim is safe. I understand what you're saying in the Sefer. Maybe you were hedging your bets. You decide, I'll be machmed. I don't know if it's a time of picking. I don't know by Esrig. I don't know if we had all these arguments. I don't know if the time of blossoming. I'll always be machmed. So the Sefer makes sense. You're machmed, even though you picked in the 8th year, we'll treat it like a 7th year because it blossomed in the 7th year. So l'chumra. So therefore you are machmed and you say that what? that you're potter from Maisa because there's all these other chumras that you treat like a shmita, and once you treat like a shmita, it's hefker. Hefker, it's not yours anymore. So obviously you're potter from Maisa, and you chayav the beer. It's like mamash, it's like shviz. Okay, the first part we're saying, I don't understand. On the other hand, you're saying a 6th year going to 7th year, we're going to be machmir. You're going to be machmir, and you're saying we treat like shmita, therefore you potter from Maisa. I understand that. So if you treat it like Shemitah because you're being machmir, why do you say, but you're potter from beer, and you're not treating it like Shemitah? You're being makel. What's going on here? Why would you possibly say that? Lovas, and we say the reason must be is because we say zil basa chanata, that we go after the blossoming. The blossoming was the 6th year, and therefore there's no beer. No, if you go after the chanata, then you should be chayv b'maisa. Why are you potter from Maisa? In other words, it sounds like from here that the reason why the 7th year going to 8th year you treat it like Shemitah is not because you don't know which way to go, so you're being machmir. It sounds like the reason is because about that you go after the time of blossoming. That's what you're ruling, blossoming. So the 7th year into the 8th year, we follow the 7th year. No, so the 6th year into the 7th year, why are you exempting from beer, which is like a big cooler, is because you believe you go after the blossoming, which is 6th year. So why are you potter from Maisa? You should be chayv Maisa. I don't understand you. Amalei, so Rabba said, you're right. I go after the blossoming, and it should be, and that's why you potter from beer in the 6th going to 7th. But you know why you potter from Maisa? Because the fact of the matter is that all your other trees are hefker. People are walking into the fields. You can't isolate the Esther tree from everything else, and therefore people are touching it and ruining it. And it's hefker. They're treating it like hefker, even if it isn't. And therefore the people make it hefker. And that's why you potter from Maisa. Yad hakom mashba, everyone is touching it. And va'at amret techayv Maisa, and especially we learned on top of the page that an Esther tree, worse than all other trees, if you touch it, it ruins the whole tree. So it's like mamish like hefker. So therefore, how can you be a chayv Maisa? So I hold, so Rabba seems to be holding that you always go after the blossoming, but the 6th year going to the 7th year when it comes to an Esther, because people are going to touch it and ruin it and everything else, that's why you potter from hefker. That's why you potter from Maisa. Which sounds like it'll be any other tree, would be exactly the same story. If it's between all these other trees and they're the shmita trees, you'll ruin it. So therefore, it becomes hefker. So we treat like hefker because the people make it like hefker. So Ramanan disagrees with that part. He agrees with everything else. He follows the blossoming, but he says just because people are manhandling the tree, they have no right to. It's geneva. Put a sign up there and say that it's not shmita tree and they shouldn't touch it, and that doesn't give you an excuse to be potter. That doesn't make it hefker. But since we both agree that you go after the blossoming, so we'll treat it like shishis, and you're chayiv ma'aser. You're definitely chayiv ma'aser. And the fact that people you touch it, they're genavim. Doesn't make it hefker. And also, but I agree with you, Rabbi. Bashvius and nichnas shmish. 7th year goes to the 8th year. Yes, it's still a shmita. So they both agree regarding that you go after the blossoming, 7th year and the 8th year, you treat like a 7th year, 6th year and 7th year. When it comes to what do you call it? When it comes to the laws of Shemitah, it does not. We follow the blossoming. But when it comes to Hefker, there comes to Maisa as an argument. Rabbi says the fact that people treat it like Hefker, so therefore it's potter, and Rabbi doesn't accept that. So Maisa has a question from another Braisa, which seems to argue Rab Shimon, Esrik Bashishish, and Nichel Shvi, the 6th year, as he went to the 7th year, Ptur Maisa, Uptur Menabir, he's potter from Maisa. This sounds like Rabbi. So this agrees to Rabbi. You potter from Maisa and you potter from beer. No, we don't treat like a Shemitah. We treat like a 6th year, which is like Rabbah. And this is going to be a kasha Rav Nuna, this first part here. Rav Nuna says, Yechayim Maisa. He says, clearly you potter. But he gives a different reason here. She'ein lav dover shechayim Maisa. In order to be chayim Maisa, it has to be, there's to be 2 criteria. Elin godel b'chiv, it had to grow at a time that was a 6th year, not on a Shemitah year. And v'nilke b'chiv, had to be collected in the 6th year. Since this is collected in the 7th year, therefore you are potter from Maisa. Okay, but the outcome is the same as Rabbah. But Ubashvi, now will be a question of both. Ubashvi is shenichnesed l'shmini, but the 7th year that falls into the 8th year. You're potter from the beer because it's not treated like a Shemitah tree. It's treated like an 8th year tree, and therefore you're potter from beer. In other words, you go at the time of picking. But you're also potter from Maisa. Now, why potter from Maisa? If you treat it like an 8th year because you picked in an 8th year, it should be chayiv Maisa. It's potter for the same reason as before. She'ein lov dover shechayiv b'beer elin can godel b'shviz v'nilke b'shviz. So he says here, in fact, he's saying here that maybe it's not. Maybe it's treated like a 7th year, and therefore and therefore you're potter from Maisa because Shemitah is potter Maisa. So then you should be chayiv and beer, but you're not chayiv and beer unless it was grown and picked in the same time. And here it was picked in year number 8. So Reisha Kasha Amnuna, the first part of the Kasha Amnuna, because it says that in the 6th year to 7th year, Yurav Amnuna say Chayiv Maisa, he cleans potter like Rabbah. Or the Sefer Kasha Ben Rabban Amnuna. Both Rabban Amnuna say 7th year to 8th year that you go that you are potter from Maisa and you Chayiv and beer, because it's a 7th year product. And he clearly says you're not Chayiv and beer because it has to grow and be picked in the same year. Says that's not a problem because Tanai, you're right. That Tana doesn't agree with us, but the other Tanaim, and we agree with the other Tanaim. Tanya, we look at another Braisa. Rabbi Yasi Avtumas Hayid. Rabbi Yasi said Avtumas testified Mishum Chamishas Cain, name of 5 elders. When it comes to an estig, it's unique, even though it's a fruit. When it comes to Meiser, Achalikitasi. We don't look at time it blossoms. We look when time it pick. When it comes to Meiser. Okay, so what does it have to do with Shemitah? Just talk about Meiser. We're arguing here about Shemitah. We'll come back to that. But Rabbi Seinu Nimna Busha, and our rabbis, they nominated in Usha Amra, they said, Achalikitasa. When it comes to an estig, we follow not only the picking when it comes to Meiser, Bein the Meiser, but also Bein the Shvitz. Also, when it comes to as far as Shemitah, we look at estig, which year was picked in. Now, I'm going to ask a question. Shvi is man de kashma. Who the argument? Who mentioned Shemitah? All Rabbi Yasi Abtumas said was that it's considered we go after the picking when it comes to Maisa. They mentioned a word about Shemitah. So obviously, that word's missing. This is how you should learn. Esrig, when it comes to Esrig, Achal. This is what the Tanakhama say. Rabbi Yasi is saying. Achal lekitose lemat Maisa. When it comes to Maisa, you go after the picking. The achachanoter l'shviis, and after when it comes to Shemitah, however, you look at when it blossomed, and that's the year it falls in. But Rabbi Seinu nimnu b'usha. Now rabbis and Usha said achalikitosa. You look after the picking. Bein lemaisa, bein l'shviis. Whether you follow Maisa or whether you follow Shemitah. So we see machlekes tanaim when it comes to Shemitah. If you go after the time of picking or after the time of blossoming. When we say that 7th year going to 8th year, it follows completely the 7th year, we follow Rabbi Yasi, we follow the Rabbanan of Usha, who they say, we follow Rabbi Yasi. He says when it comes to Shemitah, you look after the blossoming. Rabbi Yasi says the only time you look at after the picking when it comes to Maisa. But when it comes to Shemitah, we look at the blossoming. So it's year 7 to year 8. It blossomed in year 7. That's the year it is. That's the din of Shemitah, and therefore we have no problem with that other brayso that seems to say differently because we're following this. The only machlekes Rabbi Amnuna is that 6th year to 7th year also go after blossoming, so it's a 6th year product. But because people don't take care of this of the estig tree and they manhandle it, so according to Rabbi that makes it hefkin, and therefore you potter from ice. And according to Rabbi Yasi, it doesn't. Says more further. Eat what we learned. Rabbi Yechon Shlakish, Amitavayu, Rabbi Yechon Shlakish. They both say. So we continue having discussion about the Sveim. We go after Lakita. They go after Chanota. So Rabbi Yechon and Ishlabo said, "Esrig bashishi shenichnas l'shvi and esrig of the 6th year going the 7th year la'olam shishis." We look at the time that it blossomed. And we treat it like the 6th year. We had a machleket tanaim before already. If esig shava lila and b'chol drachim, or just b'shalosh drachim, and the 4th way it is different. So therefore, he's saying here, Rabbi Yechon Shlakish, they're both saying that it's similar. They both say that it's similar to what do you call it? To an esig in esig similar to a tree in all ways. That you look at the time of blossoming. And the Gemara continues. Like Rabbi Lezer says the Gemara, afilu kezayis, even if it just blossomed one kezayis, even all it did was it blossomed one kezayis in the 6th year, and the nase kika, and then it became very big. It grew to the size of a piece of bread. Nevertheless, is chayavin olav mishum tevel. You chayiv on it because a tevel is considered a 60. It's not shvius, which is hefker, and hefker therefore doesn't have all of these chayuvim and mice and all that. It is considered a 6-year product, and you're chayiv. So in other words, they paskin like Rabbi Lezer that is trouble ilim b'chol. Turned up on we learned. So we're gonna ask a question. Ilan a tree. It says in the B'rayz tree. Shechantu peiros of koyim teshol Shvat. Let's say it blossomed before Tu B'Shvat. Is misaseh l'shana she'abra. Then it's mice for the previous year. Achatu b'Shvat mis'asa l'shana haba is the forthcoming year. And we're seeing from here, it's about ordinary Paris. So Paris goes after Chanukah when it blossoms, and Tu B'Shvat is the Rosh Hashana. So before is 1 year and after is another year. Omer Ab Nechemia. And Nechemia comes along and says, Amedra Muri, when is this said? Be'ilain, by a tree, She'oise Shtei B'riches B'Shana. It has 2 seasons a year. Says the Gemara, Shtei B'riches Sachadater. Says the Gemara, B'riches really is a term we learned in Beya. It's to do with birds. You have twin birds. What do you mean by fruits? What does it even mean? It means like it has 2 groups or like 2 seasons. In other words, it grows and keeps on producing new ones throughout the year. Because a tree that everything grows exactly at the same time. Everything grows exactly at the same time. In other words, when do we say by a tree that you go after the blossoming? Because they don't all get ready at the same time. So you have to choose a time when we can say that they're all the same, so we don't get confused with 1 year to the next year. So we'll say we go after the blossoming, because they all blossom, begin to emerge at the same time. And but the time of picking is different. They become ripe different times. So therefore we go after blossoming. But those trees, where they all become ripe at the same time, they all become ripe at the same time. They all get picked at the same time. Keep going to kolim. It comes to the palm dates, azasim, olives, charuvim, and box of carrots. Even though they blossom before the Jewish, we don't go after blossoming. We go after the time of picking. They go after in the next year. No, the only reason why by fruits we do chanota, we go after the time of blossoming is because that's the only time that we can choose. That everything is at the same time. Because by most fruits, they become ripe over every month, and more fruits become ripe. So therefore, you have to. It's very confusing. If you mix up fruits and that come from 1 year and fruits of the other year, it becomes very confusing. So we have to choose a time when they're all the same. But these 3 different fruits, what we said here, like from the dried palms, or dates, or the olives, or carobs, they're all get ready at the same time. So that's the time it is when they get ripe. Omar Rabbi Yaakov says, even though Tanakhama disagrees, the Tanakhama says that all fruits you go after the blossoming. We'll follow the Nechemia that these 3 are an exception. And he said, no, go on. That's the meaning. Turns around the Shlok Rabbi Yechon and said, I don't understand. It says we have in a mission. It says that benois shuach, these white figs, these white figs, shviyish lehen. He says, when is there Shemitah Shania in the 2nd year? Why? Because it takes 3 years for them to grow. In other words, the 2nd year they begin to blossom, and you don't pick them till the 3rd year. So it seems in other words, it takes a long time for them to become ripe. They start blossoming, but they don't really begin to blossom till the 2nd year. It takes a long time for the fruits actually to come out, and they get picked in the 3rd year. But we follow the time of blossoming. So here you said before that we followed Am Nechemia, Noga Am Nechemia. That when it comes to figs, we say let's look at the time when they when they get picked, because they'll get picked at the same time. Here's just clearly, we're talking about Bnei Shurach, we're talking about these figs, these white figs, and yet we're saying we don't look at the time when they get picked, we look at the time when they blossom. No, is that similar to any other fruit? A question that is no go on. So the Gemara says, Arecha didn't answer. Ishtik, he was quiet. Why is Arecha quiet? He should have said, I'm telling you, I'm telling you that the people are following Am Nechemia. In other words, Nechemia was the one who says that these figs and olives and the carobs are different. He said that these things are different, and you're telling me that Rabbanan. You're telling. I'm telling you, Nechemia, an opinion. Who said that it takes longer. You go after the picking, and you're telling me the Rabbanan. Sorry. Sorry, I'm making here. Rabbi Yechon actually saying here, when it comes to the dried figs, we wait till the time you pick it, and we pick them, and that's the time you do it, and not the time of blossoming, the time of picking. So he's asking a question. It says here clearly, by Bnei Shuach, we do after the time of blossoming, not the time of picking. And you told me the world is no good come to Chemya. Everyone follows on the Chemya. You go after the time of picking. And here it says clear, but no sure you go after the time of blossoming, not the time of picking. So he says, look, I'm telling you people following the Chemya, you bring me a kasha from what the Rabbanan say. What does that have to do with anything? I'm just saying how people are behaving. So he said back to him, Malay, what's that? So Rabbi Yochanan, the Shlaka should have said back to him, why didn't Rabbi Yochanan answer that? So he said very simply, you know why? What kind of answer is that? So you're telling me that the Chem is a lone opinion, the Rabbanan argue, and the people decide to follow the Chem against the Rabbanan? That in itself is a question. Why would they follow the Chem, a lone opinion? So why wouldn't Rabbi Yochanan answer this? I'm telling you, no, I'm just telling you a minute about Amli. So you're telling me on Isa, you're telling me that what? That you're not allowed to be shuach. You don't go after the time of picking, but you go after the time when you when they blossom. So therefore the laws of mice are different. And I'm telling you what the meaning is. Maybe the Isa, you're right, there's an Isa, but the meaning is different. So the Gemara said again, what kind of answer would that be? The Amalei, the Shlaka should have answered it back then. That's Rabbi Yochanan didn't answer. He was quiet. Because if it's an Isa to follow this way, you tell me the minig is contrary to an Isa, how can it be? So Rabbi Yochanan anyway could have given another answer. Rabbi Yochanan should have said as follows: you're bringing me an eye from figs. I'm telling you, I'm talking about caribs that are bun. I'm telling you, when it comes to Carib, the whole Maisa of Carib is the Rabbanon, and therefore, because it's the Rabbanon, so therefore they say, you know what, we'll follow Ram the Chemia, we'll follow the lenient opinion, and we'll say that we'll go after the time of picking. Of At Amrli Shvi is that I said, you're talking to me, I'm talking about Maisa of fruit, which is on the Rabbanon, and you're bringing me an eye of an Yeshuach, whether it's treated like Shmita or not, that it's Mahataida. That it's Mahataida. You're telling me, this is what the Mishnah is saying. Mishnah is saying that B'nai Shuach, that let's say began to blossom the year of Shemitah, but it didn't get ready for another 2 years. It takes 3 years for it to begin to blossom, to emerge, or it didn't get complete until the second year. You're telling me it still has a status of Shemitah because it blossomed in the year of Shemitah. What was the case of that Mishnah? It blossomed in the year of Shemitah. It didn't become ripe till 2 years later. And you tell me whenever you pick it, it becomes ripe, you still have to treat it like Shemitah because you go after the time of blossoming. Right? And you ask the question, so how can no go like on the Chemia that says that you go after the time of picking and therefore it's not Shemitah? I'm talking to you about Maisa by fruits, which is only with the Rabbanon. You're talking to me about the way most opinions. And now Gemara holds the Rabbanon. And you're talking to me about Shemitah, which is Ma'atayda. When it comes to Shemitah, Ma'atayda, we're talking to treat the fruits when it blossoms, the Shemitah will mach. But I am being makel, and therefore we follow on the Chemia when it comes to Maisa. In fact, it's such a good answer. I'm amazed. Did Shlaka really even ask this question? Did he ask a question from Shemitah to Maisa? We want to ask back. What do you mean if he mentioned it? He says clearly the Shlakish asked Rabbi Yochanan a question from that Mishnah. What I meant to say, I'm amazed. I'm wondering whether Rabbi Yochanan was quiet because he was stumped, or it was such a silly question because it's obvious that's Shemitah, it's Ma'atayda, we're Machmer, and this is not Rabbanon. And therefore, that's why I'm quiet. That's why I'm amazed. Okay, this ends the agriculture part of our Gemara. Tomorrow we go back a little bit to Rosh Hashana.